Welcome to FairyVerse. The kingdom of Helophilia was immersed in grief today. Thousands of people outside the royal palace were in tears. Soldiers stood with their heads bowed, a little silent, as members of the royal family walked slowly behind the king's funeral procession. Within moments, the king was laid to rest in the royal cemetery. Before the people could recover from the grief of their beloved king, another commotion began within the palace. As the mournful evening ended, orders were given to decorate the royal court. Shortly after, the resounding voice of the queen resounded in the royal court of the kingdom of Helophilia. As you all know, the king has passed away in the protection of... But the reality is that even with this grief in our hearts, we must make important decisions for the kingdom. The rule of kingdoms does not stop with the passing of one person. The enemy stands at our borders, and we have very little time. The prince will be crowned this very moment. At the queen's command, the royal servants immediately stepped forward. The royal crown, encrusted with gold and precious stones, was placed on a velvet pillow and brought into the court. The young prince slowly stepped forward. His eyes were red, and grief was clearly visible on his face. But every member of the kingdom looked at him with hopeful eyes. The royal lifted the crown and respectfully placed it on the prince's head. The next moment, the entire court echoed with slogans, "Long live the king! Long live the people!" At such a time, we must secure not only the new king, but also the future of the kingdom. My second order is that the new king will be married before he leaves for war, she said. And remember, the new king will have not one but 4 wives. Upon hearing these words, the entire court erupted in commotion. They exchanged pleasant glances. The generals were stunned, and whispers filled the hall. The queen raised her hand to silence everyone. "Time is short," she said. "Therefore princesses from different kingdoms will not be selected. According to 4 marriages are permissible. Therefore the new king will marry selected female slaves." Then she made the final announcement. The first woman to give birth to the king's son will be the true queen of this kingdom, and her son will be the first and rightful heir to the throne of Heliopolis. Upon hearing this announcement, the entire royal court was stunned. "What are you listening to?" And at that moment the queen gave the command in a loud voice, "Present the future princesses." Upon hearing the queen's command, the royal guard slowly opened the palace's grand golden doors. In an instant, the entire court turned its gaze towards the doors. Everyone eagerly awaited the lucky girls who would be destined to become the Sultanate's next queen. Just a few moments later, Jasmine walked in front. Her moon-white complexion, long silky black hair, deep brown eyes, and a face so serious that anyone who saw her was involuntarily drawn to her. Her gentle nature, graceful manner, and charming personality made her the most trusted maidservant of the royal palace. Behind her was Sirkab. In her scarlet royal attire, she presented the image of a blazing rose. Her large eyes reflected fearlessness. There was confidence in her gait, and a grace on her face, as if she considered herself no less than anyone else. Third in line was Shafak. In her blue silk dress, her beauty was as captivating as the clear morning sky. There was a strange serenity in her blue eyes, a slight smile on her lips, and such innocence on her face made the beholder forget everything else. Last to enter was Mary. In her golden orange dress, she looked like the first ray of the sun. Her sad smile, sparkling eyes, and confident demeanor were completely different from the other 3. Wherever she passed, every eye involuntarily lingered on her. All 4 queens stood before the queen, bowing their heads in respect. Silence fell over the entire royal court. A single question swirled in everyone's mind. Which of the 4 would become the true queen of this kingdom? Suddenly, the young king rose from his throne and, looking at the queen, said, "Walda, you are acting too hastily. This decision does not include my consent. You are no longer just my son. You are the king of the kingdom of Helophilia. A king has no desires, only responsibilities. Prince, there is no room for refusal. All 4 marriages will be completed today before sunset. All preparations must begin immediately. I am present, Your Majesty. Do not disappoint me." Within hours, at the queen's command, the entire royal palace was decorated like a bride. Candles were lit everywhere. The fragrance of perfume was wafting. And before sunset, the new king's 4 marriages were solemnized with great pomp and splendor in the royal fane. The young king sat silently. As soon as the royal ceremonies were completed, the 4 brides were taken to the royal palace, where each had a dreamlike room decorated according to their favorite color. Jasmine was taken first to her special royal room. The entire room was adorned with white roses, white orchids, and sparkling diamonds. Crystal chandeliers hanging from the ceiling cast a star-like light on the walls. Silver fringes fluttered on the white velvet curtains, while the soft, milky light gave the entire room the appearance of a paradise palace. Jasmine entered silently. She was wearing a royal dress embroidered with white diamonds, their radiance illuminating the entire room. A long, clear scarf fluttered behind her, and the diamonds in her crown radiated a new light every moment. She slowly sat down on the edge of the bed, breathing deeply and contemplating her new life. Meanwhile, Sirkab's room was decorated with red roses, the color of love permeating everywhere. Hearts made of red roses, scented candles, red silk curtains, and golden lights gave the room a royal touch. Sirkab was wearing a royal dress embroidered with red rubies. Red roses adorned her golden hair, while her eyes looked even more captivating than before. She entered the room with complete confidence. A glance around and a slight smile appeared on her lips. Meanwhile, Sirkab was ushered into a dreamlike blue room. The walls painted a pale blue. The ceiling was adorned with glittering stars. White transparent curtains fluttered in the gentle breeze, while a decoration of blue flowers and butterflies transformed the room into a magical world. Sirkab was wearing a royal dress embellished with sapphires. Her blue eyes and gentle smile enhanced the room's beauty. She moved closer to the window and silently gazed at the sky, as if questioning her fate. Finally, Marigold was escorted to her royal room. The entire room was filled with the fragrance of naughty and golden marigold flowers. Floral arches lined the walls. The bed was strewn with naughty and caramel flowers. The golden light filled the room, giving it a beautiful view like the setting sun. Marigold was wearing a royal dress embellished with naughty crystals. Her flowing golden hair, gentle smile, and confident demeanor made it seem as if she were the most prominent figure at a royal reception. That night, in 4 different parts of the royal palace, the 4 convicts awaited the next verdict of their fates, and none of them knew that the coming night would change the course of their lives forever. The young king remained in the royal palace for a few days. He wanted to get to know the 4 convicts better and become familiar with their well-being before leaving for war. He visited each of them in turn each day, inquiring about their well-being and chatting for a while. One day, he brought a beautiful diamond ring for Jasmine. Smiling, he placed the ring on Jasmine's finger, and Jasmine burst into tears. The next day, he went to Sukab's room. This time, he had royal bracelets studded with scarlet rubies in his hand. He placed the bracelets on Sukab's wrists with his own hands. Sukab smiled and thanked him. Then he went to Shafak's room. With utmost elegance, he placed a beautiful anklet, decorated with blue beads around Shafak's feet. The anklet's soft tinkling sound echoed throughout the room, and a faint smile spread across Shafak's face. Finally, he reached Marigold's room. In one hand, he held a beautiful necklace adorned with golden chains. In the other, he held a lovely bouquet of fresh orange roses. He first lovingly placed the necklace around Marigold's neck. Then, smiling, he extended the bouquet to her. All 4 received equal gifts, but there was one difference that could not be hidden. Whenever the king entered Marigold's room, the seriousness on his face would involuntarily transform into a smile. The 2 would stroll through the palace gardens for long periods, laughing, talking, and sharing their heartfelt secrets. The other 3 would also silently observe this scene. Meanwhile, love for Badshah had slowly begun to take root in Marigold's heart. Now, every day she would anxiously await his return, and when he would leave she would smile, remembering his words. As time passed, Jasmine, Sirkab, and Shafak began to realize that the king had a special place for Marigold in his heart, and this feeling would become the foundation of jealousy, rivalry, and the battle for the throne in the days to come. A few days later, the day of departure for war arrived. The entire royal palace gathered to see the king off. The king first said goodbye to Jasmine, then met Sirkab and Shafak. Finally, he stopped in front of Marigold. For a few moments they gazed at each other in silence. The king gently took Marigold's hand and said, "Take care of yourself. You are very dear to me. Every moment spent with you will always remain alive in my memories. I will definitely come back." Marigold nodded with moist eyes. The next moment, the king mounted his horse and departed for war with his entire army. Time passed. A few weeks later, the royal physician brought the good news to Malka that Gold was as expected. Malka was overjoyed at this news. Sometime later she received the same good news about Shafak and then Sirkab, but Jasmine's room was silent. She looked at them every day, her heart breaking. For the first time a thought crossed her mind. Some had the king's love, some the joy of becoming a mother of his child. But what was my fate? Time passed. Malka visited their rooms every day to check on Gold, Shafak and Sirkab, while the royal physician was always busy caring for them. But Jasmine's room was becoming increasingly desolate. One day she was sitting alone in the palace garden when Sirkab and Shafak came to her. Sarkab asked, Jasmine, why are you so worried? You'll see, one day you too will become the mother of a prince as beautiful as the moon. Who said I was upset? My intention was never to hurt you, and why did you need to make you feel my absence? Well, you're becoming a mother. Jasmine, wait. Soldiers, call the royal physician immediately. Inform the queen that the princess has fallen. Shafak, frightened, called out to the soldiers. Within moments, the entire royal palace had gathered. Upon hearing the news, the queen also arrived in the garden. She glanced at Sarkab. Then angrily she turned to Jasmine and gave the order, Soldiers, arrest Jasmine. Queen, please forgive me. I had no such intention. Only a few days had passed since Jasmine's imprisonment, and the royal palace once again resounded with joy. The royal physician quickly appeared in the queen's court. He bowed, offered his congratulations, and informed her that my gold had given birth to a healthy prince. Upon hearing this news, the queen stood up in joy. She immediately announced a 3-day celebration throughout the city and ordered the royal treasurer to send 10 chests of treasure to Marigold's palace. The queen herself then went to Marigold's room. She held the little prince in her lap, kissed his forehead, and declared him the first heir to the kingdom. Then she personally placed the royal crown, adorned with a diamond, on Marigold's head. Finally, the royal goldsmith arrived with a small golden sword, encrusted with precious diamonds. The queen placed the sword at the prince's side, declaring it the first sign of the coming king of Helophilia. Upon this announcement, the entire royal palace resounded with cries of Wali Ahad Zindabad. A few hours later, the royal physician returned to the court and announced that Shafak had given birth to a beautiful princess. The queen simply ordered a congratulatory message. There was no celebration, no rewards, and no royal announcement. Shafak sat silently, holding her little princess close to her heart. She had already understood that happiness was not shared equally in that palace. A few weeks later, trumpets rang out outside the palace. A soldier came running into the court and announced that the king was returning from a victorious battle. Upon hearing this news, the entire palace was busy preparing for his welcome. Shortly after, Fatah Lashkar entered the palace. The king first met his mother, but his eyes were anxiously searching for Marigold. He immediately inquired about her and his prince's well-being. The queen smiled and informed him that both were well. The king quickly made his way to Marigold's palace. Marigold was sitting with her little prince in her lap. The king stepped forward and picked up his son first. He kissed her forehead and played with her for a long time. Sarkab watched this scene silently from the palace balcony. She clenched her fists. In that moment, for the first time, her heart sank. The realization dawned on her that as long as this prince lived, she would neither receive the king's love nor the throne. Sarkab couldn't sleep a wink that night, repeatedly seeing the king laughing and playing with Marigold and her prince. The fire of jealousy in her heart only intensified. Finally, she summoned Shafak to her room and began to explain that as long as Marigold's prince was alive, their children would never reach the throne. She alluded to her plan by citing the example of removing a thorn in the path, but Shafak immediately refused. Despite this, Sarkab continued to reassure her that if nothing was done today, their children would be deprived of the throne forever. A few days later, Sarkab came to Shafak again. Using the weather as an excuse, she proposed taking Marigold to the forest to feed him blueberries. Shafak remained silent. They arrived at Marigold's room and invited her to eat blueberries in the forest near the palace. Marigold happily handed her little prince over to Kodma and left with them. The three reached the forest and began picking blueberries. After a while, Sarkab, while engaging Marigold in conversation, led her to an old well. As she reached the edge of the well, Sarkab suddenly pushed her hard. Marigold fell into the well screaming. Shafak's face turned pale, but Sarkab immediately grabbed her hand and pulled her away. The two returned to the palace crying and told Malka that Marigold had slipped and fallen into the well. Upon hearing this news, King Malka and a squad of soldiers immediately set off for the forest. After a long search, Marigold was found alive inside the well, clinging tightly to a large stone. The soldiers lowered a rope and pulled her out safely. When she recovered, the king gently inquired about the incident. Marigold, what happened? Tell me everything. Your Majesty, Sarkab and Shafak brought me to the forest on some pretext. Then they tricked me into pushing me into that well. Upon reaching the palace, the king looked at Sarkab and Shafak with angry eyes. Sarkab tried to explain herself, but Shafak's courage failed. Weeping, she fell at the king's feet and told the whole truth. She admitted that Sarkab had pushed her. She tried to stop him, but Sarkab wouldn't listen. Sarkab's face turned pale upon hearing this. That very evening, the royal court was summoned. Son Harun, you should never forgive those who commit atrocities. Justice is the true strength of a kingdom. The entire court stood in silence. Queen demanded that Sarkap be severely punished, but before that could happen, the king rose from his throne and glancing around the court said, "What happened today has taught me a profound lesson. It's easy to marry 4 times, but it's very difficult to do justice to 4 relationships. Love, jealousy, and the desire for power weaken a person's heart. When the scales of justice begin to tilt, even loved ones become enemies. It's not unusual for a person to fall in love under the pressure of circumstances and events. If an ordinary woman is carried away by emotions, she should definitely be given a chance to recover. But the lives of women of royal families are not like those of ordinary women. Their lives are based not on desires, but on sacrifice, patience, character, and responsibility. Therefore, I, the ruler, announce the return of the royal chambers, the royal crown, and all the royal paraphernalia from the princesses who abandoned patience at the time. And from this day forward, Mary Gold should be considered and respected as the true queen of this kingdom. Everything she says will be considered a royal decree." Peace returned to the royal palace later that day. But this incident left a lasting lesson. It's easy to marry 4 times, but it's incredibly difficult to do justice to all of them.